Imagine this. You're at a cozy English tea party, the kind where secrets simmer beneath polite smiles, and suddenly a guest drops dead poisoned by a whisper from the past. That's the chilling spark that ignites our tale today. Chapter 1. The Village Whispers begin. Picture St. Mary Mead, that quintessential English village where nothing ever happens except when it does. And boy, does it explode in the most unexpected ways. Our story kicks off on a crisp autumn morning, with leaves crunching underfoot like brittle secrets waiting to be uncovered. Miss Jane Marple, that sharp-eyed spinster with a knack for knitting and nosing out nastiness, is tending her garden. Roses when the postman delivers more than just letters. It's a frantic note from her old friend, Dolly Bantry, begging her to come at once to Gossington Hall. Something dreadful has happened, it reads, and I fear it's murder most foul. Now, if you know Miss Marple like I do, and if you don't, stick around because she's about to become your favorite detective. She doesn't panic. No, she adjusts her spectacles, packs her knitting bag with those ever-present needles that seem to click out clues, and hops on the next train. Why? Because in her world, every village gossip thread leads to a tapestry of intrigue. As Miss Marple arrives at the grand old hall, she's greeted by a scene straight out of a nightmare. The drawing room is abuzz with police constables milling about, their boots tracking mud on the Persian rugs. In the center lies the body of young Ruby Keene, a vivacious dancer from the nearby Majestic Hotel, sprawled lifeless on the hearthrug. She's dressed in a shimmering evening gown, her face frozen in a mask of surprise, as if death caught her mid-laugh. The cause, poison, slipped into her champagne during last night's gala. But here's the twist that hooks you right in. Ruby wasn't even invited. She was a last-minute guest, crashing the party on the arm of Conway Jefferson, a wealthy invalid who's taken a shine to her, much to the chagrin of his scheming family. Miss Marple's mind races. Poison suggests premeditation, a secret so lethal it couldn't stay buried. Let's dive deeper into the suspects, because in a Marple mystery, everyone's got a motive hiding behind their teacups. First up is Conway himself, wheelchair-bound but sharp as a tack. He's been lavishing gifts on Ruby, planning to adopt her and cut out his ungrateful relatives. Could jealousy have pushed someone over the edge? Then there's his son-in-law, Mark Gaskell, a slick operator with gambling debts piling up like autumn leaves. Mark's been overheard arguing with Ruby about money, his voice rising in that drawing room just hours before her death. And don't forget Adelaide Jefferson, Conway's daughter-in-law, a widow who's all poise on the surface but simmering with resentment underneath. She's got her eye on inheriting the family fortune, and Ruby's arrival threatened to upend it all. Miss Marple settles into a chintz armchair, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she observes the chaos. She chats with the maid, Elsie, who spills the beans about overhearing whispers in the corridors, something about a lethal secret from Ruby's past. Turns out, Ruby wasn't just a dancer. She had a history, fleeing a shady life in London where she tangled with unsavory characters. Was it blackmail? An old flame seeking revenge? Miss Marple ponders this over a cup of Earl Grey, reminding us that in logic puzzles like these, the key is connecting the dots others overlook. Take a practical tip here. When solving your own mysteries, whether it's figuring out who ate the last cookie or unraveling a work drama, start by listing motives. Write them down, no matter how trivial, because, as Marple says, human nature is the same everywhere. The police inspector, a gruff fellow named Slack, dismisses Miss Marple, at first calls her an interfering old biddy. But she doesn't mind. She's used to it. Instead, she wanders the gardens, chatting with the gardener about unusual footprints near the conservatory. Chapter 2. Alibis crumble under scrutiny. As the first light of dawn filters through the lace curtains of Gossington Hall, Miss Marple is already up, her mind as alert as a fox on the prowl. She's not one for sleeping in when there's a puzzle afoot, especially one laced with poison and hidden motives. Today, we're delving into the heart of the investigation, the alibis. Those slippery excuses that suspects cling to like lifelines, only to watch them fray under the slightest tug of logic. In this chapter, we'll see how Miss Marple methodically picks apart each one, using her unerring sense of human nature to reveal cracks that the police might miss. It's like peeling an onion layer by layer with a few tears along the way, but ultimately leading to the core truth. Miss Marple starts her day with a quiet breakfast in the morning room, where the family gathers uneasily, their faces drawn from a sleepless night. Conway Jefferson wheels himself in, his expression thunderous, demanding updates from Inspector Slack, who's nursing a cup of strong tea and looking none too pleased. The inspector announces that preliminary toxicology confirms cyanide in Ruby's system, administered via her drink sometime between 8 and 10 p.m. during the gala. That narrows the window, but with over 50 guests milling about, it's still a haystack of possibilities. Miss Marple listens silently, her fork pausing mid-air as she absorbs every detail. She knows alibis are the foundation of any defense, but they're also the weakest link if built on sand. First on the chopping block is Mark Gaskell's story. He claims he was in the billiard room from 7:30 onward, smoking cigars and chatting with a couple of old chums from London. But when Miss Marple casually mentions overhearing a servant say the room was empty around 9 p.m., Mark's face flushes like a guilty schoolboy. He stammers about stepping out for fresh air, but the logic doesn't hold. Why not mention that up front? Miss Marple probes gently, like a needle threading fabric, asking about the argument with Ruby earlier that evening. Mark admits they quarrelled over a loan she refused to facilitate with Conway, but swears he wouldn't harm her. Yet, a quick check with the butler reveals Mark was seen near the drinks trolley at precisely 8:45, fiddling with glasses. Practical tip for you aspiring sleuths: when verifying alibis, cross-reference timelines with multiple witnesses. People forget that servants see everything. They're the invisible eyes of a household. Shifting focus, Adelaide Jefferson presents a more polished front. She insists she spent the evening in the conservatory, tending to her orchids and avoiding the crowd. Due to a headache, it's a solitary alibi, which makes it tricky, no one to confirm or deny. But Miss Marple, ever the gardener herself, notes that the conservatory lights were off by 8 p.m., as per the gardener's log, to save electricity. Adelaide counters that she used a small lamp, but a search turns up no such item. Digging deeper, Miss Marple uncovers a motive tied to inheritance. Adelaide's late husband left her in debt, and Conway's favoritism toward Ruby threatened her financial security. The logic here is straightforward. Opportunity plus desperation equals suspicion. Miss Marple muses over her knitting that afternoon, comparing it to a case in St. Mary Mead where a woman faked an illness to slip poison into a rival's tea. Alibis, built on solitude, are like houses of cards, she says to Dolly Bantry, who nods vigorously. Tip: always look for physical evidence to back claims. A turned-off light or missing lamp can illuminate lies better than words. Now, let's turn to Josie Turner, Ruby's cousin and dance partner at the Majestic Hotel. Josie's alibi is that she was rehearsing routines in her room upstairs during the party, exhausted from a long day. But hotel staff recall seeing her descend the stairs around 9 p.m., dressed in a dark cloak that could blend into the shadows. Josie brushes it off as fetching a forgotten prop, but Miss Marple's sharp eyes spot inconsistencies. The torn letter in Ruby's room, with its JB initials, could J stand for Josie? Further questioning reveals Josie had been managing Ruby's affairs, including some shady dealings back in London involving a blackmail scheme. Ruby wanted out, threatening to expose Josie if she didn't comply. The lethal secret starts to take shape. Perhaps Ruby knew too much about Josie's embezzlement from their act's earnings. Inspector Slack hauls Josie in for more grilling, but she holds firm, her dancer's poise masking inner turmoil. Miss Marple applies logic like a scalpel, eliminating improbabilities. If Josie was rehearsing, why no music heard by neighbors? Example. From real life, think of office alibis where someone claims to be in a meeting, but email timestamps show otherwise. Always check digital or auditory trails. They don't lie. Basil Blake enters the fray next, the flamboyant film director whose cottage parties are the talk of the village. He swears he arrived late to the gala, around 9:30, after wrapping a shoot in town. His flashy car was parked out front, corroborated by the valet, but Miss Marple wonders about the hour before. A nosy neighbor reports seeing Basil's silhouette near Gossington Hall earlier, arguing with a woman matching Ruby's description. Basil admits knowing Ruby from London film circles, where she auditioned for a role but was rejected harshly by him. Motive: Ruby had been spreading rumors about his indiscretions, threatening his career. His alibi crumbles when a prop from his set, a vial similar to the discarded one, turns up missing. Chapter 3. The lethal secret surfaces. The morning mist clings to the gardens of Gossington Hall like a shroud, mirroring the heavy atmosphere inside where the investigation deepens. Miss Marple, sipping her tea by the bay window, knows that secrets, like weeds, grow best in the dark but wilt under scrutiny. Today, the focus sharpens on the lethal, secret Ruby Keene carried a secret so dangerous it cost her life. The clues are mounting: a discarded vial, a torn letter with cryptic initials, a locket hinting at a hidden affair. Miss Marple's logic, honed by years of observing village intrigues, tells her the truth lies in connecting these dots to someone in the house. As the police bustle about, she settles into a velvet armchair, her knitting a steady rhythm, ready to unravel the mystery's core. Inspector Slack storms in with a new lead from the London police. Ruby was entangled in a blackmail scheme years ago, holding evidence against a notorious figure known only as the broker. This shadowy character ran a ring of illicit deals, and Ruby, then a chorus girl, witnessed a transaction gone wrong, fleeing with documents that could expose him. The locket found in the boathouse, engraved with 2R from J, suggests a personal tie to this past. Miss Marple muses that J could be the broker or someone closer, perhaps shielding or threatening Ruby. She recalls a St. Mary Mead case where a grocer's secret ledger led to a poisoning history repeats, she thinks. Tip for viewers: when chasing secrets, trace the money or power trail. It often leads to the heart of the matter. Like following receipts to catch a sneaky expense, the investigation pivots to the locket's mysterious man. Miss Marple suggests checking guest records for anyone with a J initial, narrowing it to a waiter, James Bartlett, hired last minute for the gala. He's vanished, but his description tool, dark-haired with a scar on his cheek, matches the locket's photo. The police track his last address to a seedy London flat tied to the broker's operations. Could James have been Ruby's link to her past, or her executioner? Miss Marple probes Dolly Bantry about waiters at the gala, learning James was seen. Hovering near the champagne trolley, gloved hands suspicious in hindsight. Logic points to opportunity, but motive remains murky. She advises in real-life puzzles, like workplace gossip or family disputes. Dig into backgrounds, old grudges often resurface. Attention shifts to the household. Conway Jefferson, still reeling, admits Ruby confided in him about a dangerous man from her past, though she never named him. Miss Marple notes Conway's protective tone. Did he know more than he let on? His nurse, Edwards, grows nervous when questioned. Her alibi of tending Conway now contradicted by a guest who saw her near the conservatory at 8:30 p.m. Edwards admits fetching a shawl but stumbles over details. Miss Marple's knitting pauses. Inconsistencies like these are gold. She recalls a village nurse who poisoned a patient to hide theft. Could Edwards be hiding a similar betrayal? Tip: watch for nervous tics in conversations. A faltering voice often signals a lie, useful in meetings or debates. Josie Turner, Ruby's cousin, is called back for questioning. Her earlier story of rehearsing cracks further when a stagehand confirms the hotel theatre was locked by 7 p.m. Josie now claims she was in her room, but a torn ticket stub in her purse places her at a late-night train to London the day before the gala. Was she meeting someone, perhaps James? Miss Marple applies logic. Josie's financial dependence on Ruby's dance act suggests a motive if Ruby planned to expose her. The lethal secret might be Josie's own misdeeds, like skimming profits. Example: think of a co-worker covering up a mistake. Check their digital footprint, like emails or logs, for the truth. Basil Blake, the film director, remains a wild card. His connection to Ruby's London circles deepens when a telegram reveals he once worked on a film about underworld deals rumoured to be funded by the broker himself. Basil denies involvement, claiming he was at his cottage editing scripts, but a neighbour saw his car near the hall earlier than he admitted. Miss Marple's logic kicks in. Basil's charm masks a temper, and Ruby's rumours about his affairs could have threatened his career. She suggests checking his cottage for the missing vials. Match logic demands physical evidence. Tip: in mysteries, physical clues trump words. A stray receipt or misplaced item can unravel a story, like finding a hidden note in a messy desk. By noon, the police searched James Bartlett's flat remotely via London contacts, finding coded letters linking him to Ruby and mentioning a deal to settle. The lethal secret crystallizes. Ruby held documents that could ruin the broker, and someone at the gala knew it. Miss Marple cross-references timelines. James served drinks. Josie slipped out. Edwards wandered. Basil lied about his whereabouts. Adelaide's cool demeanour falters when asked about a London trip she took last month. Could she have crossed paths with Ruby's past? Logic eliminates coincidence. Someone orchestrated this. The afternoon brings a breakthrough. A grouse finds a burned scrap of paper in the garden incinerator, bearing Ruby's handwriting, and the words tell all. Was she planning to expose the broker? Miss Marple deduces the killer acted to silence her before she could act. She shares with Dolly, secrets are like buried treasure, valuable until someone claims them. Tip: in solving disputes, look for what's at stake. Power, money, or reputation often drive desperate acts. As evening looms, the household grows restless. each suspect eyeing the others. Miss Marple's logic points to a web of connections. With James Bartlett as the missing link, the chapter closes with her staring at the locket, its inscription a silent clue to the killer's identity. Chapter 4. A hidden player emerges. The sun climbs higher over Gossington Hall, casting long shadows that seem to hide more than they reveal. Miss Marple, now pacing the rose garden, senses the investigation teetering on a knife edge. The lethal secret has surfaced, but a new figure, a hidden player, steps into the frame, complicating the puzzle. Logic demands that every clue, from the locket to the burned note, points to someone pulling strings from the shadows. As the police scramble to locate the missing waiter, James Bartlett, Miss Marple, focuses on a new name whispered in hushed tones. Margaret Lane, a retired governess who attended the gala uninvited. Her presence, unnoticed until now, sends ripples through the case like a stone dropped in a still pond. Margaret Lane, a wiry woman in her 60s, with a face like weathered parchment, was spotted by a footman slipping out of the library during the gala's chaos. She's not on the guest list, yet her name appears in Conway's old correspondence, tied to his late wife's family. Miss Marple, ever curious, digs into Margaret's past, learning she once tutored Ruby in London, back when Ruby was a struggling dancer. Could Margaret be the J in the locket, or a guardian of the broker's secrets? The logic of motive intrigues Miss Marple. Margaret's modest pension suggests financial strain, and Ruby's blackmail evidence might have tempted her to act. She recalls a village seamstress who killed to protect a family's secret poverty, pushes people to extremes. Tip: when investigating, check forgotten connections. Old acquaintances often hold the key, like a co-worker from a past job resurfacing with a grudge. Inspector Slack, now warming to Miss Marple's insights, brings Margaret in for questioning. She's found at a nearby inn, claiming she came to St. Mary Mead for nostalgia, not the gala. "I only stopped by to see old friends," she says, her hands twisting a faded handkerchief. But her story falters when a guest recalls her lingering near Ruby before the toast, offering her a glass. Margaret denies it, but her coat pocket yields a vial label matching the cyanide's chemical signature. Miss Marple's logic kicks in. An uninvited guest with access to poison screams intent, but why? She suggests searching Margaret's room, where police find a letter from Ruby, begging her to keep quiet about a deal gone sour. The hidden player's role sharpens. Margaret might have been the broker's enforcer, silencing Ruby to protect a larger scheme. Tip: in real-life mysteries, like uncovering office sabotage, look for outsiders with unexpected access. They're often the wild card. The household reacts with shock. Adelaide, pale as her silk scarf, admits knowing Margaret from years ago when she tutored her son. Did Adelaide invite her secretly? Conway grows agitated, revealing Margaret once blackmailed his wife over an affair, though he thought it settled. Miss Marple notes the pattern, secrets within secrets, like Russian dolls. She cross-references Margaret's movements with the gala timeline. Margaret arrived at 7:45, seen near the drinks by 8:15, gone by 9. Logic suggests she acted swiftly, but alone. Miss Marple recalls a case where a governess colluded with a servant to steal jewels. Could Margaret have an accomplice? Tip: map relationships visually. A quick chart of who knows who reveals hidden alliances, like plotting a family tree to spot feuds. Attention returns to James Bartlett, still missing. A telegram from London confirms his ties to the broker, working as a courier for illicit funds. Ruby's locket photo suggests intimacy, perhaps a lover turned traitor, Miss Marple theorizes James delivered the poison to Margaret, or vice versa, forming a deadly pact. She advises checking train records for James's movements, finding he boarded a 10 p.m. express to London, suggesting flight. Logic eliminates coincidence. His disappearance aligns with the murder's timing. Example, in everyday puzzles, like tracking a missing package, check transit logs or timestamps to pinpoint culprits. Meanwhile, Josie's nervousness escalates. She admits knowing Margaret from their London days, when Margaret introduced Ruby to shady contacts. Josie swears she cut ties, but a hidden bank book in her hotel room shows deposits from an unknown source, possibly the broker's payments. Miss Marple's knitting slows. Josie's financial trail smells like motive. Basil, too, squirms when Margaret's name arises. His film funding came through her contacts, tying him to the same underworld. The hidden player, Margaret, seems to link everyone, her quiet presence a catalyst for murder. Tip: follow the money in investigations. Bank records or sudden purchases often betray guilt, like spotting a friend's lavish trip after a broke. Excuse by afternoon, a search of Margaret's reveals a locked diary cracked open by police. It details Ruby's plan to turn over the broker's documents to the authorities, naming Margaret as a go-between who betrayed her. The lethal secret's weight grows. Ruby's evidence threatened a criminal empire, and Margaret, desperate to save herself, acted. But Miss Marple wonders, was Margaret the mastermind or a pawn? She recalls a village vicar manipulated by a conman. Logic demands checking for a bigger player. She suggests tracing the broker's current alias, suspecting he's closer than anyone thinks. As night falls, the hall buzzes with tension. Conway confronts Adelaide about Margaret, Josie avoids questions, and Basil drinks heavily. Miss Marple, sipping sherry, pieces together the puzzle. Margaret's arrival wasn't chance. Someone invited her to silence Ruby. The chapter ends with a chilling finder, second vial, hidden in the library's fireplace, suggesting the killer planned a backup murder. Chapter 5. Alliances shift in the shadows. The air in Gossington Hall grows thicker, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. Miss Marple, seated by the fire in the morning room, feels the investigation pivot toward a new dynamic. Alliances are shifting, and the once clear lines between friend and foe blur like ink in the rain. The discovery of Margaret Lane as a hidden player has rattled the household, and the second vial in the library fireplace suggests a plot deeper than a single murder. Miss Marple's knitting needles move steadily, their clicks a metronome for her thoughts as she pieces together the web of loyalties and betrayals. Logic, her trusted guide, whispers that someone in this house orchestrated Margaret's presence, and the shifting alliances point to a conspiracy that could unravel everything. Inspector Slack, now fully reliant on Miss Marple's insights, gathers the suspects in the drawing room for a tense showdown. The atmosphere crackles with suspicion as eyes dart between Conway Jefferson, Adelaide, Josie Turner, and Basil Blake. Margaret Lane, brought from the inn under police escort, stands rigid, her sharp eyes betraying nothing. Miss Marple observes her closely, noting the slight tremor in her hands, a sign of fear, or perhaps defiance. The inspector reveals the diary's contents. Margaret was Ruby's confidant in London, privy to her blackmail evidence against the broker. But the diary also hints at a pact. Margaret agreed to silence Ruby for a hefty sum, wired to her account days before the gala. Miss Marple's mind races. Who paid her, and why involve an outsider when the household had ample opportunity? Conway. Jefferson breaks the silence. his voice gravelly with anger. He demands to know why Margaret, a ghost from his family's past, resurfaced now. His grief for Ruby is palpable, but Miss Marple detects a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Did he suspect? Ruby's secret threatened his empire. She probes gently, asking about his recent financial dealings. Conway admits to transferring funds to a private account, claiming it was for Ruby's future, but the timing aligns suspiciously with Margaret's payment. Logic suggests Conway might have hired Margaret to protect Ruby, only for the plan to backfire. Miss Marple recalls a village squire who paid off a blackmailer, only to be betrayed. Trust is a fragile currency. Adelaide, ever composed, shifts uncomfortably when asked about her connection to Margaret. She insists their contact ended years ago, but a letter found in Margaret's diary mentions Adelaide's son, now grown and living abroad, as a leverage point. Miss Marple deduces Margaret may have threatened Adelaide's reputation, forcing her to act as an intermediary. The alliance here is fragile. Adelaide's loyalty to Conway conflicts with her fear of exposure. Miss Marple notes how Adelaide avoids Margaret's gaze, a silent signal of a broken pact. The logic is clear. Alliances built on coercion crumble under pressure like a house built on sand. Josie Turner's composure cracks next. She admits Margaret approached her weeks ago, offering a cut of the payment to keep Ruby quiet. Josie refused, she claims, but her bank book tells a different story. Deposits matching the sum Margaret received. Miss Marple's logic dissects this. Josie's financial desperation, tied to her failing dance act, made her susceptible to temptation. Was she an active conspirator or a reluctant pawn? Her shifting story now claiming she only met Margaret to warn Rubilac's conviction. Miss Marple observes Josie's clenched fists, a sign of inner conflict, and wonders if her alliance with Margaret was a last-ditch effort to save herself. Basil Blake, meanwhile, plays the rogue, dismissing Margaret as a nobody from his past, but Miss Marple uncovers a link. His film's funding, traced to the broker, passed through Margaret's contacts. Basil's alliance with her, however fleeting, suggests he knew of Ruby's evidence and feared its impact on his career. His loud protests ring hollow when the police find a script in his cottage mentioning a character eerily similar to Rubia, dancer with dangerous secrets. Miss Marple's logic pins him as a peripheral player, perhaps complicit in silence rather than action. But his shifting allegiances muddy the waters. The day unfolds with a search of the hall's lesser-known corners. Miss Marple suggests checking the attic, where old family records might reveal Margaret's true role. There, among dusty trunks, police find a ledger detailing payments from Conway's estate to an unnamed consultant. Margaret's alias. The alliance between Conway and Margaret deepens, but Miss Marple questions whether he acted alone. She recalls a St. Mary Mead scandal where a family patriarch was manipulated by a trusted aide. Logic demands scrutiny of those closest to power. Nurse Edwards, previously quiet, becomes a focal point when a servant overhears her whispering to Margaret about keeping the plan. Edwards denies it, but her shifting demeanor, avoiding eye contact, betrays her. By afternoon, the police trace the broker's alias to a London address, only to find it abandoned. Miss Marple theorizes the broker is a puppet master, orchestrating alliances from afar. She suggests checking telegrams sent from the hall, uncovering one from Adelaide to an unknown recipient, coded with phrases matching Margaret's diary. The alliance shifts, again Adelaide, as a go-between. Miss Marple's knitting slows, her mind mapping a conspiracy where multiple players, bound by fear or greed, converged on Ruby, The second vial suggests a backup plan, perhaps to eliminate a loose end like Margaret herself. As evening settles, the household gathers for dinner, but alliances fracture openly. Conway accuses Adelaide of betrayal, Josie snaps at Basil, and Margaret remains silent, her eyes scanning the room. Miss Marple, sipping her soup, sees the puzzle's edges forming, a network of shifting loyalties, with Ruby's secret as the catalyst. The chapter closes with a cryptic note slipped under Miss Marple's door. "Stop digging, or you're next." Logic tells her the killer is nervous, and the truth is close. Chapter 6. A betrayal cuts deep. Night falls over Gossington Hall, the moon casting eerie shadows through the tall windows, as if illuminating the betrayals that fester within. Miss Marple, undeterred by the threatening note, sits in her guest room, her knitting untouched, as she ponders the web of deceit tightening around the suspects. The cryptic warning only sharpens her resolve. Logic dictates that a desperate killer betrays themselves by acting rashly. The investigation now turns to a deeper wound, a personal betrayal that drove someone to poison Ruby Keene. Miss Marple senses the lethal secret wasn't just about the broker's empire, but a deeply personal grudge, one that cut through the heart of the household's fragile bonds. Inspector Slack, shaken by the note's audacity, doubles the guard around Miss Marple. Though she waves off their concern with a serene smile, she suggests focusing on the emotional undercurrents, as betrayals often stem from love, loyalty, or trust turned sour. The police revisit the locket, now confirmed to contain a photo of James Bartlett and Ruby, suggesting a romantic bond. Miss Marple theorizes that James, tied to the broker, betrayed Ruby by revealing her plan to expose the criminal network. But his flight to London indicates fear. Perhaps he, too, was betrayed by someone closer to the plot. She recalls a St. Mary Mead love triangle where a jilted suitor poisoned his rival. Emotions she knows are as lethal as any toxin. Conway. Jefferson's grief takes a darker turn when questioned about his relationship with Ruby. He admits to seeing her as a surrogate daughter, filling the void left by his late child. But a letter found in his study, written in Ruby's hand, reveals she feared his possessiveness, hinting he might have known about her past and tried to control it. Miss Marple's logic probes deeper. Conway's payments to Margaret suggest he sought to bury Ruby's secret. But did he realize Margaret's true intent? His betrayal, if unintentional, could have set the murder in motion. She notes his trembling hands when discussing Ruby, a sign of guilt or heartbreak. Logic cannot distinguish yet. Adelaide's facade of calm shatters when confronted with a telegram she sent to Margaret, coded with instructions to handle the problem. She claims it referred to a financial dispute, but Miss Marple sees betrayal in her eyes. Adelaide feared Ruby's influence over Conway would ruin her son's inheritance. The governess, Margaret, confirms Adelaide pressured her to act, promising a share of the estate. The betrayal cuts both ways. Adelaide used Margaret, but Margaret's greed led her to poison Ruby instead of negotiating. Miss Marple's knitting resumes a slow rhythm as she pieces together this double cross. Logic suggests Adelaide's maternal instincts, warped by desperation, made her complicit. Josie Turner's role grows murkier. A maid overhears her sobbing in her room, muttering about failing Ruby. Miss Marple questions her privately, learning Josie loved Ruby like a sister but resented her rising star. When Ruby planned to expose the broker, Josie begged her to stop, fearing retaliation. Margaret's offer of money swayed Josie briefly, but she claims she backed out. Yet, her fingerprints on a glass near the champagne trolley suggest a deeper betrayal that she unknowingly aided the poisoning. Miss Marple's logic dissects this. Josie's loyalty to Ruby clashed with her survival instincts, making her a pawn in a larger game. Basil Blake's betrayal is less personal but no less damning. Police find a contract in his cottage, tying his film to the broker's funds via Margaret. He admits knowing Ruby's secret but swears he only stayed silent to protect his career. Miss Marple sees his cowardice as a betrayal of integrity. His silence enabled the murder. His flustered demeanor, once charming, now betrays a man cornered by his own ambition. Logic places him on the fringes, but his connection to Margaret keeps him in the frame. Nurse Edwards emerges as a dark horse. Her quiet demeanor hides a fierce loyalty to Conway, but a search of her quarters reveals a hidden letter from Margaret, threatening to expose Edwards' past theft from a former employer. Edwards' betrayal is subtle. She slipped cyanide from Conway's medical supplies to Margaret, believing it would protect her position. Miss Marple's logic unravels this. Edwards' fear of losing her livelihood drove her to betray her own ethics. The second vial, she suspects, was Edwards' insurance against Margaret's betrayal of her. By noon, the police uncover a coded message in James Bartlett's flat, intercepted before his flight. It names Margaret as the poisoner but hints at a master in the hall. Miss Marple's logic narrows the field. Someone manipulated Margaret, using her as a tool to eliminate Ruby. She suggests checking Conway's financial ledgers again. Finding a discrepancy, large withdrawal made by Adelaide, not Conway, routed through a shell account. The betrayal deepens. Adelaide, not Conway, funded Margaret's act, betraying her father-in-law's trust as evening approaches. The household gathers in the library where accusations fly. Conway weeps, feeling betrayed by Adelaide. Josie collapses. Guilt-ridden, Basil storms out, cursing Margaret, and Edwards glares silently. Miss Marple, sipping tea, sees the puzzle's heart. A chain of betrayals, each link forged by fear or greed, with Ruby as the victim. The threatening note, she deduces, came from someone desperate to stop her final betrayal. The chapter ends with a scream from the gardener. Servant finds Margaret collapsed, poisoned by her own cyanide. Chapter 7. The killer's mask begins to slip. The scream from the garden still echoes in the halls of Gossington Hall as dawn breaks, casting a pale light over a scene now doubled in tragedy. Margaret Lane's lifeless body, found slumped among the rose bushes, confirms a second poisoning cyanide, the same method used on Ruby Keene. Miss Marple, standing at the edge of the crime scene, her shawl drawn tight against the morning chill, knows the killer's mask is slipping. Logic dictates that Margaret's death was no accident. It was a desperate move to silence a loose end. The investigation now teeters on the edge of revelation. As the web of betrayals tightens and the true orchestrator begins to emerge from the shadows, her knitting lies idle in her bag, her mind racing to connect the final threads before the killer strikes again. Inspector Slack, his face grim, oversees the removal of Margaret's body while barking orders to secure the grounds. The toxicology report is swift. Cyanide, ingested hours ago, likely slipped into her tea at the inn. Miss Marple notes the irony. Margaret, a tool in Ruby's murder, became a victim of the same poison. The second vial, found in the library fireplace, suggests a calculated plan, but whose? She recalls a St. Mary Mead case where a conspirator was eliminated to protect the mastermind. Logic points to someone in the household, panicked by Margaret's loose lips. The threatening note under Miss Marple's door now feels like a warning. From the true killer, not Margaret, the suspects gather in the drawing room, their faces a mix of shock and fear. Conway Jefferson, his wheelchair creaking, demands answers, his grief now laced with paranoia. Miss Marple observes his clenched jaw as he suspects someone close betrayed him twice. She questions him about Margaret's final hours, learning he met her privately yesterday, urging her to confess. Conway claims he offered her protection, but his ledger shows another payment to her account, suggesting coercion or a bribe. Logic unravels this. Conway's desperation to protect Ruby's memory might have pushed him to silence Margaret, but his physical limitations make him an unlikely poisoner. Miss Marple's mind lingers on his influence. Money moves hands, even if his own cannot. Adelaide Jefferson, pale and trembling, insists she last saw Margaret years ago, but her coded telegram to the governors betrays a deeper connection. Miss Marple probes her about the withdrawal from Conway's account, which Adelaide admits she facilitated, claiming it was for estate repairs. The lie's thin bank records show the funds went to an offshore account linked to the broker. Adelaide's mask slips as she stammers, her loyalty to her son's future clashing with her fear of exposure. Miss Marple sees her as a pawn, manipulated by a greater force, but her role in Margaret's death is unclear. Logic suggests Adelaide knew too much, making her a target or an accomplice. Josie Turner collapses into tears when questioned, her guilt over Ruby's death now compounded by Margaret. She admits to meeting Margaret at the inn, begging her to flee before the police closed in. Josie swears she didn't poison her, but her fingerprints on a teacup from the inn raise suspicions. Miss Marple's logic dissects this. Josie's emotional turmoil suggests she's no mastermind, but her presence at the inn places her dangerously close to the crime. Was she framed, or did her desperation to escape the broker's reach push her to act? Miss Marple notes her shaking hands, a sign of fear rather than cunning. Basil Blake, ever the showman, deflects with bravado, claiming he was editing scripts all night. But a servant reports seeing him near the inn's back entrance, his car parked hastily in an alley. His connection to the broker via film funding makes him a suspect in Margaret's silencing. Did he fear her implicating him? Miss Marple recalls his script's eerie parallels to Ruby's life, suggesting he knew her secrets. Wait. Logic places him as a peripheral player, but his slippery mask charm, masking panic, keeps him in focus. She suggests checking his car for traces of cyanide residue, as poison requires proximity. Nurse Edwards, usually a shadow in Conway's orbit, draws Miss Marple's scrutiny. Her access to cyanide, confirmed by the tampered medical supplies, makes her a prime candidate. For both murders, Edwards claims she was tending Conway all evening, but a gardener saw her slipping into the inn's kitchen, where Margaret's tea was prepared. Miss Marple questions her about the threatening note, noting Edward's flushed cheeks when pressed. The letter from Margaret, threatening to expose Edward's past theft, suggests a motive silencing Margaret to protect her position. Logic points to Edwards as the hand that poured the poison, but was she acting alone? By noon, the police uncover a crucial clue, a hidden compartment in Margaret's diary containing a list of names tied to the broker's network. One name stands out: Edward Langley, a pseudonym Miss Marple's suspects belongs to someone in the hall. She cross-references it with Conway's business contacts, finding a match to a silent partner who funded his enterprises. The mask slips further. This partner, possibly the broker himself, manipulated the household's alliances. Miss Marple suggests tracing Langley's recent movements, uncovering a telegram sent from the Hall to London, signed E.L. Edward Langley, the sender. Unclear, but suspicion falls on Adelaide, whose financial dealings align. The afternoon brings tension to a boil. Conway confronts Edwards, accusing her of betrayal. Adelaide snaps at Josie, blaming her for dragging Ruby into danger. Basil retreats, his bravado fading. Miss Marple, sipping tea in the library, pieces together the puzzle. Margaret's death was a calculated move to sever the link to the broker, but the killer underestimated her diary secrets. She recalls a village betrayal where a trusted friend turned poisonologic demands, looking at those closest to the victims. The threatening note, written in a hurried scrawl, matches no one's handwriting yet, but its tone suggests intimacy with the Hall's secrets as evening falls. The police search Edward's room, finding a vile wrapper hidden in her sewing kit, linking her to the inn's tea. Miss Marple's logic crystallizes. Edwards, driven by fear of exposure, poisoned Margaret to protect her role in Ruby's death. But the E.L. telegram suggests a mastermind pulling her strings. The chapter ends with a chilling third vial, tucked in Conway's wheelchair, hinting at another planned murder. The killer's mask is slipping, but their identity remains just out of reach. Chapter 8. The truth begins to surface. The atmosphere in Gossington Hall is suffocating, as if the weight of 2 murders presses down on every soul within. Miss Marple, perched in the conservatory with a view of the now tainted rose garden, feels the truth rising like a tide, ready to sweep away the lies. The third vial, hidden in Conway's wheelchair, is a stark warning. The killer is still active, their desperation growing as Miss Marple's logic closes in. The investigation now focuses on peeling back the final layers of deception, tracing the threads of Edward Langley's alias to the heart of the conspiracy. Her knitting needles resume their quiet rhythm, a counterpoint to the chaos. As she prepares to expose the mastermind behind the lethal secret, Inspector Slack, his patience, frayed, calls an emergency meeting in the dining room, the long mahogany table a stage for the unfolding drama. The suspects, now gaunt with fear, sit in uneasy silence. Miss Marple's presence, once dismissed, now commands respect as she shares her theory. Edward Langley, the broker, is not an outsider but someone embedded in the Hall, orchestrating Ruby and Margaret's deaths to protect their empire. The telegram signed E.L. is the key, and its origin within the household points to a traitor among them. She recalls a St. Mary Mead case where a trusted villager hid behind a false name logic demands unmasking the alias through actions, not words. Conway Jefferson, his eyes hollow, denies any connection to Langley, but his financial ledgers tell a different story. A series of payments to Langley's account, routed through Adelaide, suggest Conway knew more than he admitted. Miss Marple questions him about his business partners, learning Langley was a silent investor in his mining ventures, introduced years ago by Margaret. Conway's shock seems genuine, but his failure to disclose this earlier smells of complicity. Logic suggests he was manipulated, his trust in Langley exploited to fund the murders. Miss Marple notes his trembling voice, grief or fear of being exposed. Adelaide's composure unravels completely when confronted with the telegram's handwriting, which matches her own. She admits to sending it, claiming Langley pressured her to protect her son's future. The truth surfaces. Adelaide met Langley in London, where he promised to secure her inheritance if she silenced Ruby. Margaret was her tool, but Adelaide didn't anticipate the governess's death. Miss Marple's logic dissects this. Adelaide's fear of losing her status drove her to conspire, but her panic after Margaret's death suggests she's not the mastermind. Her tearful confession implicates Langley as the true power, but where is he? Josie Turner, now a shadow of her vibrant self, reveals a bombshell. She overheard Adelaide and Edwards whispering about Langley days before the gala. Josie's loyalty to Ruby kept her silent, but fear of Langley's reach pushed her to comply with Margaret's demands. The truth about her role surfaces she passed the champagne glass to Ruby, unaware it was poisoned, acting on Margaret's orders. Miss Marple sees Josie as a tragic figure, her love for Ruby twisted by manipulation. Logic places her as an unwitting accomplice. Her fingerprints on the glass a cruel frame. Basil Blake's facade crumbles when police find a coded note in his cottage, addressed to EL and detailing Ruby's movements. He admits to spying on Ruby for Langley, hoping to secure more film funding. His betrayal was mercenary, not murderous, but his knowledge of the poison's source Margaret's vial implicates him further. Miss Marple's logic pins him as a cog in the machine, his ambition blinding him to the consequences. His nervous laughter, once charming, now betrays a man trapped by his own greed. Nurse Edwards, cornered by the vile wrapper in her sewing kit, confesses to supplying the cyanide for both murders. She claims Langley blackmailed her, threatening to expose her past theft. Edwards poisoned Margaret's tea to protect herself, believing it would end the threat. But the third vial in Conway's wheelchair suggests she planned to eliminate him next, fearing his suspicions. Miss Marple's logic unravels her motive. Edward's loyalty to Conway was a lie, her true allegiance to Langley's money. Her cold stare, once unnoticed, now reveals a calculating mind. By afternoon, the police trace the EL telegram to a London office, where Langley's alias links to a man named Edmund Langstaner, named Conway recognizes as a distant cousin. The truth surfaces. Langston, posing as Langley, infiltrated the Jefferson family years ago, using Margaret as his operative. Miss Marple suggests searching the hall's guest records, uncovering Langston's visit weeks before the gala, disguised as a business associate. His presence ties every suspect together: Conway's investor, Adelaide's manipulator, Josie's intimator, Basil's funder, Edward's blackmailer. The evening brings a confrontation in the library. Conway, devastated, admits Langston approached him about Ruby's secret, promising to handle it. Adelaide confesses to arranging Margaret's arrival, Josie to passing the glass, Basil to leaking information, and Edwards to supplying the poison. The truth is a tangled web, with Langston as the spider. Miss Marple, her voice calm, points out the third vials, significance Langston planned to eliminate Conway to secure his empire. The chapter ends with a phone call from London police. Langston has been spotted, but a new clue hidden safe in the hall promises to reveal his final secret. Chapter 9. The killer's identity unmasked. The shadows in Gossington Hall seem to deepen as the investigation reaches its climax, the air heavy with the weight of secrets about to be laid bare. Miss Marple, seated in the library with a cup of tea gone cold, feels the puzzle's pieces clicking into place. The hidden safe, discovered behind a portrait in the dining room, holds the final clue to unmasking the killer. The third vial, the coded telegrams, and the web of betrayals all point to Edmund Langston, alias Edward Langley, the broker himself. But Miss Marple's logic insists on one last step, proving his presence and pinning the murders on the mastermind. Who orchestrated the chaos? Her knitting lies forgotten, her eyes sharp as she prepares to confront the truth head-on. Inspector Slack, energized by the London police's sighting of Langston, orders a thorough search of the safe. The lock yields to a key found in Conway's study, revealing a trove of documents, financial records, coded letters, and a photograph of Langston with Ruby Keene, taken years ago in London. The image confirms their connection. Ruby wasn't just a witness to his crimes. She was once his confidant, perhaps his lover, before she turned against him. Miss Marple recalls a St. Mary Mead scandal where a trusted friend betrayed a partner for profit. Logic demands tracing Langston's movements to confirm his role in the murders. The documents reveal Langston's infiltration of the Jefferson family. He posed as a distant cousin, gaining Conway's trust as a silent investor. His plan was to secure Ruby's silence, but when she threatened to expose his criminal empire, he turned to murder. Miss Marple pieces together the timeline. Langston visited the hall weeks ago, planting Margaret Lane as his operative. The safe's contents include a letter from Langston to Margaret, instructing her to poison Ruby and promising a fortune. But Margaret's greed made her a liability, leading to her own poisoning. The third vial, hidden in Conway's wheelchair, was meant for him. Langston's final move to eliminate the family's patriarch and seize control of his wealth. Conway Jefferson, broken by the revelations, admits to meeting Langston under the guise of business. He trusted him, unaware of his alias as the broker. Miss Marple questions him gently, noting his anguish as he recalls Langston's charm. Logic suggests Conway was a pawn, his wealth the true target. The payments to Margaret, routed through Adelaide, were Langston's doing, using Conway's accounts to fund the murders. Miss Marple observes Conway's trembling hands, grief for Ruby, or fear of his own betrayal. She deduces Langston exploited Conway's affection for Ruby to manipulate the household. Adelaide Jefferson, now a shell of her former poise, confesses to her role. She met Langston in London, where he promised to secure her son's inheritance. If she facilitated Margaret's arrival, the coded telegram was her handiwork, sent under duress. Miss Marple sees Adelaide's desperation. Her fear of poverty drove her to comply, but she didn't anticipate murder. Logic places her as an accomplice, not the killer, her mask of loyalty to Conway shattered by Langston's coercion. Her tearful admission reveals Langston's true power, his ability to bend others to his will. Josie Turner, racked with guilt, admits to passing the poisoned glass to Ruby, believing it was a harmless favor for Margaret. She overheard Langston's name in Ruby's warnings, but stayed silent, fearing his reach. Miss Marple's logic unravels Josie's role. A tragic pawn, her love for Ruby twisted by Langston's threats. Josie's fingerprints on the glass were a deliberate frame, orchestrated by Langston to divert suspicion. Her sobbing confession paints her as a victim of circumstance, not malice. Basil Blake's bravado collapses when confronted with the coded note to Langston. He admits to leaking Ruby's whereabouts for film funding, unaware of the murder plot. Miss Marple's logic pins him as a greedy opportunist, his ambition blinding him to Langston's schemes. His connection to the broker's network, via Margaret, kept him tethered to the conspiracy. But he lacked the nerve for murder. His nervous fidgeting betrays a man out of his depth. His mask of charm long gone. Nurse Edwards, the quiet manipulator, emerges as Langston's key operative. The vial wrapper in her sewing kit and her access to cyanide confirm her role in both poisonings. She confesses to acting on Langston's orders, blackmailed over her past theft. The third vial was her contingency, meant to silence Conway if he grew suspicious. Miss Marple's logic dissects her motive. Fear of exposure and loyalty to Langston's money drove her to betray Conway. Her cold demeanor, once unnoticed, now reveals a calculating mind, but she was Langston's tool, not the mastermind. By afternoon, the police receive word. Langston has been apprehended in London, carrying documents matching those in the safe. Miss Marple suggests a final confrontation, gathering the suspects in the library. She lays out the case. Langston, as the broker, orchestrated Ruby's murder to protect his empire, using Margaret to deliver the poison and Edwards to supply it. Margaret's death was his cleanup, with Edwards as the executioner. The third vial targeted Conway, ensuring Langston's control. Each suspect played a role. Adelaide's funding, Josie's unwitting delivery, Basil's leaks. Edwards poisoned, but Langston was the puppet master. The room erupts in accusations, but Miss Marple's calm voice cuts through. She points to the safe's photograph, proof of Langston's intimacy with Ruby, and the telegrams, proof of his presence. Logic eliminates all doubt. Langston is the killer, his identity unmasked by his own greed. The chapter ends with Conway's anguished cry, vowing justice for Ruby, as the police prepare to bring Langston to trial. Chapter 10. The final pieces fall into place. The storm that has loomed over Gossington Hall finally breaks. Rain lashing the windows, as if washing away the sins of the past. Miss Marple, standing in the grand hall, feels the weight of the case lift, though the scars of betrayal linger. Edmund Langston's arrest in London marks the end of the Lethal Secrets reign, but the final pieces of the puzzle must be set in place to bring closure to the grieving household. The truth, now fully exposed, reveals a tapestry of greed, fear, and manipulation, with Langston as the weaver. Miss Marple's logic, relentless and precise, has unraveled the mystery. But she knows justice requires more than an arrest. It demands understanding. She gathers her thoughts, ready to tie up every loose end. Inspector Slack, triumphant yet exhausted, assembles the household one last time in the drawing room. The suspects, now drained of their defences, sit in silence, their roles in the tragedy laid bare. Miss Marple, her knitting bag at her side, takes centre stage, her voice steady as she recounts the case's resolution. Langston, as the broker, built a criminal empire on secrets, with Ruby Keene as his greatest threat. Her possession of documents detailing his illicit deals, hidden in a London bank vault, prompted his desperate plan. He infiltrated the Jefferson family, using his alias Edward Langley to manipulate each member, turning their weaknesses into weapons. Miss Marple recalls a St. Mary Mead vicar who fell prey to a charismatic conman logic. She notes triumphs by exposing the human flaws behind the crime. Conway Jefferson, his spirit broken, listens as Miss Marple explains Langston's deception. The safe's documents reveal Langston's long con. He posed as a cousin to siphon Conway's wealth, using Ruby's affection to gain leverage. When Ruby planned to expose him, Langston enlisted Margaret Lane to poison her, promising a fortune. Conway's payments, funneled through Adelaide, were unwitting contributions to the plot. Miss Marple's logic clears Conway of direct guilt. He was a victim of trust, his love for Ruby exploited. His quiet sobs echo through the room, a testament to his loss. Adelaide Jefferson, her elegance replaced by remorse, admits to her complicity. Langston's promise of financial security for her son blinded her to his true intent. She arranged Margaret's presence, believing it would protect her future, but her coded telegrams sealed Ruby's fate. Miss Marple sees Adelaide's regret as genuine. Her fear of poverty was Langston's leverage, not her malice. Logic places her as a manipulated accomplice, her punishment now a life of guilt. Adelaide's eyes meet Conway's, seeking forgiveness. But he looks away, wounded by her betrayal. Josie Turner, freed from suspicion, weeps openly. Her role as the unwitting deliverer of the poisoned glass was Langston's cruel frame. Exploiting her loyalty to Ruby, Miss Marple comforts her, noting that love, though twisted, was her only crime. Josie's fingerprints on the glass were a deliberate misdirection, but her confession to Inspector Slack clears her name. Logic reveals her as a pawn, her heart broken by Ruby's death and Langston's manipulation. Basil Blake, his charm extinguished, faces a lesser reckoning. His leaks to Langston, driven by greed for film funding, aided the murder indirectly. Miss Marple's logic spares him as a minor player. His ambition was his downfall, not a murderous intent. He vows to abandon his shady connections, his once loud voice now subdued. The police, satisfied with his cooperation, let him go, but his reputation in St. Mary Mead is tarnished. Nurse Edwards, the true hand of death, faces the harshest judgment. Her confession to supplying cyanide for both Ruby and Margaret's murders under Langston's blackmail seals her fate. The third vial, meant for Conway, was her final act of desperation, fearing his growing suspicions. Miss Marple's logic exposes her cold calculation. Her loyalty to Conway was a facade, her true allegiance to Langston's money. Edward's arrest is swift, her icy demeanor cracking as she's led away in handcuffs. The final piece falls into place with a call from London. Langston's trial is set, with the safe's documents and Ruby's bank vault evidence ensuring his conviction. Miss Marple reveals one last detail: a letter Ruby wrote to Conway, found in the safe, expressing her love and regret for endangering him. It was her attempt to make amends, cut short by Langston's poison. Miss Marple hands it to Conway, who clutches it, tears streaming. Logic, she reflects, not only solves crimes but heals wounds by revealing truth. As the rain slows, the household disperses, each member carrying their share of guilt or grief. Miss Marple, packing her knitting, prepares to return to St. Mary. Mead, her work done. She leaves Dolly Bantry with a quiet word. Logic sees through shadows, but kindness heals the heart. The case of the lethal secret closes, a reminder that even the darkest mysteries yield to reason. Thanks for joining this journey. Hit that like button, subscribe for more mysteries, and comment below with your thoughts on Miss Marple's logic.